Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I always take the time right here, and you guys, my listeners, know that this is one of my favorite parts until when I start the conversation and the guest drops some stuff down that causes me to dig a little deeper. But this here, right here, is one of my favorite, is the fact that they're coming with some things that are very expensive in my mind. Time. What a beautiful commodity. 24 hours given to every single human being on this planet. So we cannot argue that one had more than the other. What we do with it is our responsibility. The other is your journey. I want to thank you so much, Clint, for coming and sharing both your journey, because your journey housed information, wisdom that brought you who you are today. And we want to delve into that so that we can learn and become better human spirits while we occupy this beautiful rock called Earth. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me here. I look forward to our conversation.
Excellent. Tell the people the things that you have created as a result of your journey. I've been telling them that we are all creators. We have the ability to create. We create by when we take our thoughts and manifest it into the things that we want. So talk to us about those things by which you create, but more importantly, by which you serve others.
Yes. So my name is Clint Callahan. I have been a therapist for the last 23 years, and I've now gotten into life coaching. And so I've created a program called Small Changes, Big Impact, 1% per day transformational system, because throughout the course of my life and my journey, I found that it doesn't take really big changes to make lasting changes and impacts in your life. So I've devised a system using my 23 years of therapy and clinical knowledge and skills to teach people multiple different psychological tools to help them navigate the rough waters of life so they can become more present in their daily life, and so they can recognize who they want to be, where they want to be, and how they want to be. And all those things are very important, because until you know who you are and until you can own who you are, you can't actually make any real lasting changes.
I absolutely agree. And you've crystallized what I call personal development in a few statements. And until you become aware of who you are, you haven't really started. And I have been in that space where I worked in healthcare in an assisted living facility where I was dealing with 60, 80, 90-year-old folks that didn't know who they were. And I thought that was one of the saddest things to have ever experienced, to have been here for that time and don't have a clue as to who they are. But a lot of it was because of, again, the programming that we received. So one of the things that we talk about here, Clint, is we like to take that journey back into our childhood, because that's the first space that we visit, and we stay there for a while and we accumulate wisdom, and all kinds of stuff happens there in our childhood. Invite us into your childhood. What was that picture like as this young man was brought into this space and has been landed on this planet called Earth?
My story began where I really shouldn't be here, because when I was born, I weighed 1 pound, 15 ounces, and that was 47 years ago. So they didn't have all the medical technology that they have today, where they can take, people that are basically micro preemies, because at the lowest weight I got to was 1 pound, 9 ounces. And they usually don't survive. And if they did survive back then, they had neurological problems, blindness, trouble with walking, breathing, all the things. So the fact that I'm here and I'm normal, whatever that may be, is actually, it's a miracle. And so that's what I was always told by my parents. That's how my life started, because the first 4 months of my life was basically just a fight to survive. And it wasn't until later that I found out that that survival left a big impact in my body and the way that I experienced the world. And it's through that and therapy and EMDR and all these things I've been able to process through a lot of this stuff. But it's one of those things that the most amazing thing is that when you're told from the beginning of your life that you're here for a purpose, because you shouldn't technically be here and you shouldn't be the way that you are, it really changes fundamentally the way that you view the world. So I've
Yeah.
always felt like from the very beginning that I'm here to do something good. I'm here to help people. I'm here to do something. And my mom was she was a unlicensed social worker, so she started Emotions Anonymous chapter
Hmm.
in our town. She worked for the local church. She worked for the local Lutheran Social Services. She worked for the children's home for people for children that were abandoned or were neglected. So she did all that stuff. So I grew up in that, and my dad was an engineer. So I grew up with the heart and the head
Nice.
simultaneously. So when I look at the way so when I do therapy and life coaching with people, I look at it from both aspects of what's hurting your heart, but also what is your head telling you to make your heart hurt. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things that it was a very interesting balance I have. I grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and with my younger sister, and my life was great pretty much up until I was about 5, and then I started going into school. And when you go into school, and you kind of have a little bit of a sense of I'm here to save people and do a bunch of good
Hmm.
work, they tend to not take that kindly because who are you to tell me that I need to
Yeah.
do things differently? And so
Yeah.
that kind of began the process of me being bullied a lot as a kid through elementary, junior high, and high school. And that, gave me all the wonderful things that gives you, which is people pleasing, needing to be a chameleon, learning how to read people to try to deflect and get people to not look at me and look at somebody else. It made me really interested in psychology because it gave me a lot of anger issues. And so I went to therapy for the first time when I was about 10 or 11. And then that started me on my path of recognizing, oh, there is a way that you can deconstruct this and decode this. And then that was something that I've been interested in for the rest of my life for the last, now that would be 36 years. I've been interested in why do people do what they do? Why do these thoughts and these feelings create the action and reaction that then creates the cycle of pain that we can find ourselves stuck in?
Yeah, that's a powerful imagery that you had given to us, Clint. I know haven't heard the terminology micro yet, but this is the first time I've heard micro. My son was a preemie, and
Mm-hmm.
one of my best friends, he also was a preemie, and these guys are as big as anything now. My son, he had some. Um, Trouble pronouncing things because
Mm-hmm.
of that and so forth. So we had to work with him to help him with that, and he still has some remnants of but that is a part of him and his journey, and he's doing fine. But yeah, but I've never heard the terminology the micro as yet until today. So here you are. You had
Yep.
your wonderful upbringing, Clint.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom and dad. Um, uh, Seeing, as you mentioned, and having an insight into the knowledge as to the heart and the mind, and you walking through your life. You walked into school and you saw that they didn't need a savior, and they wanted to make sure that you knew about it, and they expressed themselves as to how they feel. So here's this young man. Um, After this exposure, as you said, things began to happen to you, began to become angry and all of those things. Um, Talk to us, invite us there, because I know you as a therapist, these are some of the conversation and memories that you were mightily aware of in your life. Um, how did this young man handle it? I know you said anger, but I'm sure that's
Mm-hmm.
just one aspect of it. There are things that causes that. How did
Yep.
this young man begin to navigate his life in that space?
So I began to navigate that space of being bullied because my bullying was it was different, and it was the same as a lot, but it was different because individually with my friends, they were my friends. We
Yeah,
were close. We had great conversations. There was depth there. But then when the group got together, then the group think took over. And
yeah,
that's when the bullying mostly occurred, was when it was in the group. And I know that, and I now know, of course, after doing this for 23 years and being a therapist and a life coach, that it was the group mentality because they
yeah.
didn't want to be singled out and they didn't want to be targeted. So it was better to go along than to stand out and say, no, this is wrong. We shouldn't treat this person this way, because they didn't want to be targeted themselves, which I understand. It doesn't make it hurt any less, but I
Yeah.
understand it. And so for me, what that started was I started really recognizing how people think. I
Hmm.
watched and looked at their emotions. I became really good at trying to anticipate what people need and try to give them what I thought they needed. Not
Yeah.
necessarily what they actually needed, but what I thought they needed, just so they wouldn't look at me. And so
Yeah.
that's part of the people pleasing aspect. But within that, I also knew inside of myself that that wasn't right as well. And so that added to the depression and the anxiety. And I had a lot of trouble going to school because I would get physical anxiety symptoms of feeling sick and feeling ill. And so I would try to avoid school as much as I could. But most of what I did is I started to turn inward. I began
Yeah.
to read more, play video games more, do comic books more, do all these other things where the hero always wins, where you have multiple chances to make things and create my own version of control for my life, which meant not being around the people that were causing this. But then, of
Yeah.
course, I couldn't not go to school. So I had to go through that and through the process of feeling sick and finding my place and doing those different things. And it was one of the hardest times of my life was going through that. And it's through that process, though, that I recognize that without that, I wouldn't be able to read people as well as I can with the work that I do. It was
Yeah.
preparing me for this work. I didn't like the way it prepared me, but
Yeah.
that's what it did to prepare me to do this work, because now I'm able to talk to somebody for just a little bit and give them an idea of this is where I see and what I see you thinking and feeling and acting. And a lot of the times I'm pretty spot on, and it makes them just go, wow, how can you read my mind? Get out of my mind. And I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
reading your mind. I can see the pain and the suffering you're going through because I've been there, because I know what that's like to feel lost and empty and disconnected, yet still having a place that is connected and having that as well. There was the weird dichotomy of my life, right? My family
Yeah.
was nurturing, comforting. There was no abuse, no trauma, no real anything in my family when I was growing up. But at the same time, outside of that, it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
So I had the flip of what a lot of people have, which is their family isn't safe, but school is safe. So,
Yeah. That's uh, trauma. I tell people is the birthplace into the supernatural. Um, it's the beginning of the pull. I have a theory, Clint, that because I've interviewed so many people, and the story that I hear, the thread, if you will, is several. One is the um, how they want to help people. That's always one, and that theme starts when they were very young.
mm-hmm,
And the other theme is that where they are uh, being formed, I believe there's a need outside ahead of you. If you will,
mm-hmm,
walk with me for a second. I believe that um, the designer saw a need of many people that needed your story, your skill set, if you will. And because you could be trusted with the end results, that you would not hoard the information and the journey, and that you would become a true servant. You went through that, and I see that in everyone because the end result, uh, always the information that they acquired when they were young was what is needed to help the others out, because it's a familiar place. That's why I always tell people, if and when you're going to get a coach who's been through some stuff. Find out if your
mm-hmm.
coach has been through some stuff, because if they haven't, then they don't know what they're talking about. So here's this young man navigating, learning some of the most powerful information, how to read a human being, how to step out of self and become an observer, to become aware of energy, decisions being made from afar as they're approaching, all of those things. You're looking at everything and gaining. How did that knowledge and information, Clint, begin to guide you as you're moving through into, let's say, college when you were heading in that direction?
When I initially went into college, I knew I wanted to do something in the psychological field. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to become a behavioral profiler, and I wanted to catch serial killers for a living. That was the first place I started. So I went into criminology and into psychology, and I really found out that, I understand the psychology piece of criminology, but I want to help people. And by the time you're going after serial killers, you can't really help people because they've already done so much damage and you can't fix them. So then I took an intro to social work class. And the thing that got me about social work was it was all about the skill. The piece that I went through it was called PI, person in environment, where it didn't just look at what's happening up here or the story that we're telling ourselves, but it took what's going on up here. Where are you in the world? What neighborhood are you in? What's your family like around you? Who are your friends around you? Is there addiction, abuse, violence, stress, anxiety? Is there just joy, happiness, friendliness? What is around you? If you know what's going on in the environment, it can help you to then help that person move through and find the way out of a bad environment into a better environment, or how to improve the environment that they're currently in. And that really captured the way I wanted to live my life, and also the way I wanted to help other people, was because that was, again, like the dichotomy that I talked about before. My two environments, out of my house and inside of my house, was so vastly different that I really recognized that I turned out to be the person that I am because I had a safe floor. I had a safe place to land where I could make mistakes, and it wouldn't be you get the belt, or you get abused, or you get yelled at, or you get called names and all these things for making a mistake. And so I'm a big believer. One of my core tenets of my program is build failure into any goal that you have. Because if failure is part of the goal, you ultimately will succeed, because it's just part of it. And it's one of the most important lessons that I learned in my life, is that by building that in, it gives you the freedom to try, to test, to flex, to see, to understand, to look at it in multiple different ways, because there's no one path. If there's 3 lessons I've learned in my life, is from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, I'm making it up as I go along, just like every human being on the planet. If somebody tells you they have the answer with a capital THE, run away, because there is no the answer. I have some answers, but I don't have the answer. And the last thing I've learned is that the only way that you can help other people is just like you've discussed. You have to go through crap yourself. Because if you don't go through it yourself, how can you help anybody else, or even notice where they are, if you haven't been neck deep in it yourself, or sometimes snorkel depth? It depends, right? And without those things, you can't actually create change, which change is a very simple thing to do, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do simultaneously.
It's and usually, as you said in the onset, the shift is just a just small shift. It's never usually, as we stated earlier, it's never the major stuff. The major stuff doesn't. It's the little things that eventually creates the. And I use this example: when you have a giant ship, and it's this little rudder that is moving this giant thing. It's moving it, and then when you're turning, it's slow, but it's gonna turn because it's engaged, and you have to look at your journey in that fashion. That once you begin to turn the rudder, most people, because of our societal training and programming, we want to see the results in a day or 24 hours. And I tell people there's a couple of things that are the enemies of personal development, and that's one of them. That microwave mentality, and the other is perfection. There's no such thing when you're moving a giant ship. You have to, as Clint said, you have to make adjustment. Even a skilled captain captain have to make adjustment based on the condition of the weather that day. Yesterday, it was different. 5 minutes ago, it's different. 5 minutes from now, it's different. And so that captain is making the adjustment based on the outside um, information, but he's not getting upset. He's just doing his
Yeah.
thing. And so I try to
Yeah.
tell people, just do your thing. Don't worry about it. So here you are. All this information, Clint, is
Mm-hmm.
being dropped into you. You're in school, you're in college. You
Mm-hmm.
understand some of the principles being taught to you as a young man with your friends. And now
Mm-hmm.
you are gaining, you were in the lab, if you will. And so now you're gaining the theory behind the lab, if you will. You're here,
Mm-hmm.
all this theory is being dropped and deposited in you. What did the theory begin to do to you?
It began to crystallize the path of what I wanted to do. And then the other thing that added is I had a comparative religion class during my master's program, and that's when I started studying Buddhism in earnest. And I had teachers, and I sat and practiced Buddhism and did all those things for about 6 different years while I was going through school in my graduate studies. And I just practiced that, and I've still practiced that. I still bring mindfulness and being present into all of the work that I do, because that for me was the biggest thing. One of my favorite lessons that one of my Buddhist teachers taught me was he had me sitting there meditating, and he put an egg in my hand while I was meditating. He said, okay, your job is to protect this egg. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm sitting there, I'm meditating. He came back probably, I don't know, maybe, when you're meditating, it could have been 2 minutes or it could have been 15 minutes. I don't really know
Yeah.
how long it was. But he came up behind me and he scared the crap out of me. And so what did I do? Crushed the egg. This
Yeah.
was not a hard boiled egg.
Yeah.
It was a raw egg. So now I had egg and shell and stuff just dripping down my arm, all over my pants. And I'm like, and it was, and of course, I got angry, as
Yeah.
anybody would. And he's like, why are you angry? I told you to protect the egg. Why didn't you
Yeah.
protect the egg? And I'm like, well, because you just scared me. He's like, but you didn't protect the egg. You didn't do what I asked. He's
Yeah.
like, go wash up, sit down. I want you to meditate on that. And so I
Wow.
meditated on that for, it felt like months and months. It was probably like maybe a couple of weeks. But then it came to me and it crystallized in my brain. Oh, this is what what they've been talking about in school. This is what they've been talking about when it comes to family dynamics, when it comes to things, is that when you love something, you want to do everything you can to protect it. But
Yep.
sometimes the way that you protect it ends up smothering them and crushing them, which is
Yeah.
why you have to have an open hand and not a closed fist. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that blew my mind, because at that moment it was like it didn't make sense in the beginning, but after it made sense, it was like that makes it. It is all about letting go. It's
Yeah.
about letting go of ego, letting go of self, letting go of the outcome, letting go of your feelings, letting go of the future, letting go of what could, may, might possibly be, because it doesn't exist. The only way it comes into existence is when we move through it towards it.
Yeah.
And that's going to require 97 million different adjustments on your parts, like the big ship, to swerve through those icebergs of life so you don't
Yeah.
end up like the Titanic.
Yeah. It's absolutely a great lesson that your teacher brought into your space because um, meditation, I tell people, is one of the most powerful tools available to mankind when it comes to personal development. And we talk about personal development, and I think some people don't understand what it means sometimes. Personal development, in my mind, means the ability to pick and choose the thoughts that you want to manifest. That's personal development. When one gets into a space of meditation, there are thoughts that will come to you 100 million times a minute, and you have the ability to choose or whether to rest. I remember, Clint, when I started my meditation and I had all these thoughts. I was a single dad with four boys living with me, and I had opportunity to have wonderful thoughts because of all the noise and whatever. But my kids, I program them to know that when dad is in his meditated state, no one interrupts me. I don't take any calls, nothing, nothing, nothing. Um, because I had to learn how to control my thoughts because they were coming so fast. And there was nothing wrong with that. It was just I had to now decide. And I would remember telling myself, okay, not now, rest. And I had to have these
Yes.
type of conversations. And I eventually learned how to rest and not allow all of the confusion to come. But what I understood there was it allowed me to choose. And so I want to encourage you guys that are going through all those things, meditation, journaling. These are some of the tools that you can utilize. Just grab them, find them, whatever fits you. Bring it in. Yoga is
Yeah.
another. Bring it into your space to assist you now as a partner to manage your thoughts, because that is the key by which you will become successful. Here you are, Clint, you are now seeing what a powerful lesson that your teacher gave to you, and you learned about being present.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you got that insight,
Mm-hmm.
how did it change you in your relationships in this fashion towards you and towards others?
I forgave myself, and I was able
Yeah,
to forgive others in a more deeply and profound way. True forgiveness. Because I really learned that true forgiveness isn't about me forgiving other people for them. It's about forgiving other people for me. So I
yeah,
don't carry the baggage of others, or I don't carry my own baggage anymore because I don't need to. Because
yeah,
these things happen. You have two choices. You can either hold on to it and let it keep frying you, or you can let it go and you can move through it. And one of the clearest examples of this was with my mother. When I was 29 years old, she ended up committing suicide because she had a autoimmune disorder that caused her pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So her body went from the body of a healthy late 40s person to basically the body of a 90-year-old in the space of about a year. And so at that time, I was a working social worker therapist. I was working in a locked psychiatric hospital. I was working with people that were acutely and actively suicidal. I was with her for the 2 weeks prior to her death at a pain clinic with doctors, nurses, and all this stuff. And she told me exactly what she was going to do. And I went and told them exactly what she was going to do. And I told them my credentials, all the stuff that this is not just a son saying this is going to happen to his mother. This is also a professional who is also her son saying this is
yeah,
going to happen to her, and that she is not kidding around. And they basically told me, no, as long as she does the program, she'll be okay. And I said, no, she's not. You don't understand. I've heard this conversation for the last year and a half of doing my work every day. This is not just a flight of fancy, or just she can't just handle it today. This isn't a long-term, deep thing that she's dealing with. And so going through that and watching her make that choice, it is one of those things that it forced me to really stop and really become even more present. After a
yeah,
very, after I definitely spun out from grief for several years and
yeah,
left the field, and because all the guilt, all the shame, all the doubts, all the things I should have, could have, would have done more, all those things, because it was such a large loss that it
yeah,
took me about 3 to 5 years to start to pull myself out of it. And that really didn't happen until I had my first child. And by then, 2008 in America had happened. So we lost our home. We were living with my wife's parents, with our newborn child. And I had to stop and look at my life and go, what happened?
yeah,
How did this get here? And so I had to go back to the core principles that we've been talking about. I started meditating again. I started journaling again. And I actually started the process of creating this life coaching program without knowing that I actually started the process of creating this
yeah,
life coaching program, because I had to make that change in myself, because I didn't like who I was, how disconnected I was. because I didn't feel like, because if this person who taught me all this stuff throughout my life could make this choice, then anybody could. So now I can't trust anybody to
Yeah.
not make that choice. And so going through that, I had to take that step back. I had to begin to take a breath. I had to begin to analyze, why was I reacting so strongly in this grief? And I know that it was because I thought I could have saved her.
Yeah.
And I had to let that go because she made a choice. And it took me a long time to recognize that the choice she made was hers and hers alone. And I did everything I knew how to do, and it still worked out the way it did. And I had to let that go, and I had to give it to the universe, to God, to whatever you believe. I had to let that go because that was a burden that was crushing me,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do the work that I was put here to do. So I remember I was meditating when I really began meditating in earnest again, a couple of months after I began this process of meditation and journaling and beginning to make those small changes of reconnecting to my wife, reconnecting to my son, reconnecting to my in-laws, and thanking them for assisting us and helping us and getting back into life again. I had this moment where I felt like she was with me, and I heard her ask me, "What are you doing? This is not what
Yeah.
I taught you to do. This is not why you're here. Don't let my death and my loss derail you from doing what you're supposed to do." And it got me back on the path of doing social work and being out there and helping people again and being present again. And it was a very profound experience. And it's those kind of moments that when you get those things, and this thing, it wasn't a big moment, right? It was this little
Yeah.
whisper in the back of my brain in the middle of a meditation session that completely
Yeah.
shifted the way that I viewed everything. And it let me come back to myself again. And it was that was another one of the most hard lessons I've had to learn, is that even through loss, she is not gone, because
Yeah.
half of her is still in me. Everything she taught me is still in me.
Yeah.
All those things are still there. I just had to wall them up for a while because it was too painful. But in doing so, it's like I cut myself in half. And that
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
a healthy way to live.
Yeah. That's a powerful journey that you just took us on. It is. I I had similar situation with my mom, and I remember when she made the decision to transition as well. And it's a great space to be in because you can take it personal. And I began to investigate something similar like yours. And that I one day I was riding on my bike, and I've said this story before, and there's an incident that happened in my family, and I took it personal, and the decisions that they that had made and so forth, and I'm all upset early in the morning on my bike, screaming and yelling and stuff like that. And the thought came to me like, why are you acting this way? Why are you upset? And I'm driving, and I'm like looking at the beautiful nature, and I'm like, yeah, why am I upset? And it was right on that moment that I began to see and learn a powerful, profound lesson. I allow someone's decision because I was not giving them permission to be.
Mm-hmm.
I took it personal because it didn't conform to my ego. I had to, at that point, force myself to become one that lived present,
Yep.
meaning that anyone that presents in us and they make a decision, we have to be present enough to let them be present in
Mm-hmm.
their decision and not allow their decision to upend my world. And I had to manage mine as you did with your mom based on the decisions that was made. And so I understand that aspect. But I learned this lesson a couple of months ago, Clint, and I'm learning how to practice the art of being present, because being present is, it's a big fancy word that people use, but
Mm-hmm.
being present is a lot of responsibility to self and to others. You're allowing them to make their decision. and you're allowing yourself not to be offended by their decision. That's a tough place to be, but it's a necessary place to be.
It is. And it's interesting because one of the things I remembered, it was amazing, like right after I had that experience, and I really just kind of began to release my ego of I should have been able to save her.
Yeah.
Once I
Mm-hmm.
began to release that, one of the things that my crisis intervention professors told me in school really just came flooding back into my brain. And she's like, as a therapist and as a crisis intervention specialist, your job, you have one job. You are the lightning rod. All the lightning rod does is it lets the lightning strike them and it grounds out. She's like, but the
Yeah.
problem for most therapists is they can't help but be the one holding on to the lightning rod. So if you ever smell Kentucky Fried Chicken, you got to let go of the lightning rod because you are cooking yourself. And in that moment, I got a big whiff of chicken, and I'm like, oh, I'm holding on to the lightning rod. I am frying myself. I am now blackened chicken because I've been holding on to that lightning rod for too long, and I have to let it go. And I love that
Yeah.
visualization because you can
Yeah.
see it, right? When you think
Mm-hmm.
about that, you can see it. And that's one of the things that I've carried forward and that I teach people through my life coaching and through that is in life, you have to be the lightning rod because lightning will always strike, and it will strike from the weirdest places, from places you never suspect. But you recognizing it and seeing it for what it is, that it's not mine, it's theirs. I can be present for you and not hold on to your pain. I can be there and help you process it, but I don't have to hold it for you. It is still yours, but I can help you process it and ground it out so you don't have as much anymore. And that's the lessons, right? As you continue to move through these things, you learn these lessons, and these lessons, if you truly understand them, finally give you peace. And I love meditation because
me too.
The presence of being meditation, the presence of being present is such a simple thing to do. But it's so hard because this is telling you 97 million things all the time. And that's one of the first things I learned when I was doing meditation is that the job of meditating and being present isn't to get this to be quiet.
Yeah.
Because it's like asking the wind not to blow. It doesn't work. All you can do is recognize the thoughts and let them flow past. And if they come back more than once, then maybe take a look at them. But beyond that, most of the time, let them go. Because if they're important, they'll come back. It's not going anywhere because it's all up here anyway. Where is it going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I would tell mine, and I need you to rest for a moment. And I would just begin to go in. And I have learned how to manage that. And sometimes one will come and it will be a situation that needs some beginning to focus, some delving into, if you will, and to extract information. And so it goes as you begin to focus on it, the light bulb effect begins to happen, and you begin to get it, and you're like, okay. And I've had those moments, and they're as just as powerful as anything else. But as Clint and I are saying, these shifts are very minute little things that shifting is happening within you all the time. And accumulatively, when these little pieces come together, is when you stand there and go, whoa. When you look back, you have done so much, and you're standing in unfamiliar ground and you're looking back going, how in the world did I get here? But it's because of those little shifts.
And that's the thing, right? For most people, they don't look back. They don't take the time to look back and celebrate the smallest, tiniest wins.
Thing.
And so part of my job as a life coach and as a therapist is to turn you around and say, look at this. 2 months ago, you would have reacted like this to this very situation because you told me that you reacted like this to this very similar situation. But look at what you did today. Instead of you reacting in anger or rage or frustration, you stopped. You took a breath. You recognized that it was their stuff, not yours, and you walked away. When before you would have engaged, you would have done things that would have made you feel worse in the long run. And it's by showing people and allowing people to see and to look back and to celebrate those small changes, they then begin to see the snowball effect that happens when you begin the process of change. It's a snowball. One flake doesn't create an avalanche. 100,000 flakes, you got yourself a big snowball. 100 million flakes, and now you've buried the town of Switzerland. And that's the way it is. And that's the way you look at change. Small, consistent changes every day. It only takes 15 minutes of time if you give yourself the space to have 15 minutes of time. My daily practice right now is I spend 3 minutes meditating in the morning and 2 minutes journaling. And then I spend 3 minutes meditating at lunch. And then I journal for 2 minutes. And then I do that at night. And that's how I break up my 15 minutes during the day so that I can keep myself on track. I use it as guardrails to know what my intentions are in the morning, to see if I'm following through on my intentions at lunch, and then to look at my day after the end of the day and go, did I meet the goals? And here's the thing, the goals that I make for myself are not 100 million goals a day. I have two. I have two goals that I have in my life. And it took me a year to whittle down all my goals to these two things. And my professional goal is if I can see a little flicker of a light bulb above somebody's head, then I did some change that day, and I will continue to help move them towards that light. And my personal goal is be present.
Just it is that. The most powerful. One of the most powerful advice. What they're doing, and I try to tell the folks, they're implementing laws, and laws are things that take time to move from one. You have the law of momentum when you are moving these things, small steps. When you activate it, it will come to a point that it will run down anything once that keeps moving because another law comes into play, the law of friction. And as all these laws are being implemented by your belief and your thoughts, as a plane has, there's the law of gravity. And yet a plane that's thousands of tons are able to, by activating a law, able to override the law of gravity. And
you gotta love aerodynamics.
And the next thing you know, there's tons of stuff. Once it breaks that law, it is flying, and you and I are sitting in there having coffee, and next thing you know, we're at another destination. But laws were implemented in order to bring that outcome. And that is why I say to you that get your eyes off of the perfection. Perfection is the enemy of personal growth, because none of us really know what that means. And I tell folks that you see these girls and these models are walking and looking all good and don't understand the price that they pay by vomiting, not eating, doing all kinds of crazy stuff to maintain an illusion that doesn't exist.
And they also have a full team of people. They've got a full team of people behind them to make them look that good. And in magazines, they've got a full suite of software to make them look that good. And now we have filters on everything to make ourselves look that good, right? And it was interesting because when I started doing podcasting and I started doing the podcasting stuff, the video podcasting, and I started doing video therapy, the first thing I was like is, am I really that red? I never knew I was that ruddy. When did this happen? How did I get so ruddy? I'm like, am I embarrassed all the time? And my wife's like, no, you've always been that red. What did you think? I'm like, I don't know. I never saw it before. It's just those kind of things, right? You don't know what you don't know until you're like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay. It's the Irish in me. I got a bit of ruddiness going on.
So here you are. You had a detour, Clint, a valuable detour when your mom took her life, and you were detoured for several years. And as you
Mm-hmm.
began to find your way back onto the path, if you will, um, and you began to notice that it was the individual small steps, and you said you began to notice that,
Mm-hmm.
and you now, from that detour, is going to put together the vision that you have. Invite us
Yes.
into that as you're moving through that, as you're exiting that detour, if you will, for the heaviness of it. You always
Yeah.
have the memory, but the heaviness
Yes.
of the detour as you're walking through those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what were some of the tools? You mentioned some. You
Mm-hmm.
talked about your journaling and stuff like that. How did they
Mm-hmm.
assist you,
Mm-hmm.
and how did you begin to notice your peace, your revelation that you are now going to put together to serve others?
So the process that I found is I'm like I said, my dad's an engineer, so my brain is part engineer. So my brain
Yeah.
started going, okay, why does why does the human body react this way? And so I
Mm.
started studying anthropology, and I started studying neurobiology, and I started studying all these other things. I'm not an expert by far, but I love to read a lot. It's
Yeah.
one of the gifts I got when I was young, because I used to go through a 300-page novel in about 3 or 4 days. So I've learned how
Uh,
to read and synthesize information really good. And I started reading these different things, and it came to the realization that for human beings, there's two types of fear story that we have. The first is biological. This is
mhm.
the survival instinct that we all have. But everybody, like you say, it's trauma from the time that we're born, right?
Yeah.
That's the fear story that we all have based on 185,000 years of human survival. Because you have to remember, right now in America, we are 200 years out of
Yeah.
the Wild West.
Yeah.
We are 70 years out of the first computer. We are 1995, so 38 years since the internet. We
Yeah.
are since 1998, since I know 2008 since the first smartphone, and then
Yeah.
2005 since major, like 2015 since major apps started coming up, and now we're into AI. So if you look at that,
Hmm.
185,000 years of nothing but survival,
Yeah.
hardcore, 24 hours a day, scraping to survive, into 5,000 years of recorded history where things got a little easier, but it was still mostly survival up until, in America at least, about the last maybe 20 years or so. Because now, if I wanted to,
Hmm.
I could never leave this office again. I could do video therapy with people and make money. Amazon and Walmart Plus could drop off food at my door, and I could never
Hmm.
leave this office again, and I would be comfortable. So that is such a profound shift in the way human beings
Yeah.
have lived for so long, that I recognize that it's the fear story, because we all start out at a level 1 or a level 2 of fear. But then you throw in life, and life now throws extra levels on there. So now most of us are running, the people, are running at about a 3 to a 5 fear story. Ones with extra
Yeah.
trauma, like going through military service, abuse, domestic violence, those kind of things, they're running at more like a 7 to an 8. But the level is 10. So if you're
Yeah.
going from 5 to 10, you go into fear that fast. If it's from
Yeah.
7 to 10, it's even faster. And so it's recognizing the fear story, because that's what it is. The way the fear story goes biologically is, I'm in trouble, something bad's going to happen, things are after me, I'm going to die. It literally goes from
Hmm.
something to death in like 3.6 seconds. And then
Wow.
the story in your brain augments that by saying, yeah, see that person over there? That person
Yeah.
wants to get you. See that person over there? That person wants to get you. See that person, that person? Your brain then picks it up, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you become
Hmm.
paralyzed with anxiety, trauma, fear, depression. All of these things come from fear. So again, that's why going back to being present and learning how to regulate this, because the other thing I learned, which was amazing, is 80% of the signals that this gets are from
Yeah.
here down.
Yeah.
But how often do we, but when we talk about mental health, we usually focus on this. We
Hmm.
don't focus on this. So the first thing I teach people is a variation of meditation and stuff and breathing. I teach them basically what I call my emotional management plan, so that you can attack it from the psychological, the physiological, and the physical. So the first thing that you do is you do box breathing, and box breathing was designed by scientists for pro athletes, where it's breathing in 4 and holding your breath, breathing out for 4 seconds and holding your breath empty for 4 seconds, and then breathing back in for 4 seconds. So 4, 4, 4, 4, all the way around, right? That's what you do. But by doing that, scientifically, what it does is it stops your parasympathetic nervous system from thinking that there is a tiger that's attacking you right now. Because that's what the biological fear state is telling you. I am physically being attacked. And as amazing as this is, it can't tell the difference between a real, physical, live threat to your body and the story in your head.
Yeah.
And so by box breathing, you're turning off your adrenal system. You're slowing it down, because if you're running from a tiger, are you going to think to box breathe, or are you going to breathe and pump and run as fast as you can to try and get away? And so that's the thing, right? So by doing that piece, by doing the box breathing first, you're stopping your physiological system from activating, and you're slowing it down. You're saying, no, there is no tiger, there is no bear, there is no physical danger. It's all in our head. Then you journal, and you literally, what I call, you mind dump. You write whatever the story is, whatever that story is that you're thinking in that moment, dump it on the page. Then go do some light exercise, so you can take that adrenaline and all the stuff in your system, all those chemicals, and get them away from the 4 main areas they go if you're just sitting still and you're in a panic attack mode. Because where they go is to your stomach, to your heart, to your lungs, and to your brain. And when you have adrenaline in your stomach, you feel like your guts are trying to crawl out of your body. When it's your heart and your lungs, your heart is beating faster and your lungs are breathing shallow because you're getting ready to fight or to run. And when it's in your brain, it creates that time dilation effect where everything seems like this is going to be forever. And that's the thing that is the hardest, because it's designed to help you dodge if you're being attacked by a tiger. Because if everything is slowed down, your reaction time is now faster. But when you're sitting there and you're in anxiety and you're in fear, you can't move. You become paralyzed and you have nothing to dodge, because you can't run away from the story in your head. And then what you do is, after you do the exercise to get the adrenaline to flow to your arms and legs and stuff, instead of stay in your gut and your heart and your lungs and your brain, because that's its job, is to go to your arms and legs, not to stay situated here. And then from there, you go back and you read what you wrote. And if you still agree with it, even 50%, do it again, because you're attacking it from all 3 angles, from the psychological, the physiological, and the physical. And by doing that, you can begin to calm down. And it takes about 5 or 6 minutes to do it once you get really good at it. In the beginning, it takes about 10 to 15. But right now, I can do that in about 5 or 6 minutes. And it gets me to shut down and to stop and to not get caught up in that cycle that you get caught up in. Because adrenaline just does this when you're sitting. It just stays right here. And when it stays right here, you feel like, because the story in your brain tells you, this is my new reality forever. Which, and then to that, my response is, wait 5 minutes.
That's a great response. I always tell people that, just relax, calm down 1 second, you'll see the result. So here you are, Clint, you have gone through all of those, and those guys, you guys that are listening to us, and you're hearing what Clint has put together. It is a purposeful design. And I know many of you, when some of us say meditation, you think we want you to become a monk, and that you're trapped in some place. We see, and Clint had mentioned that he does his, and he breaks it up into manageable pieces to manage his, his outcome, so that he knows where he is to locate himself throughout the day. And so you can do the same. You don't have to do the classic meditation, but you can break it up into small pieces whereby you can manage it, and your outcome will be profound. It's just managing it and doing it. And once you become a disciple, I tell people, disciples change the world. A disciple is one who becomes disciplined, and that's it. And so as you become disciplined within your 5 minutes and so forth, constantly, you will do like that plane. You will break that law and you will begin to fly. And that's when that revelation is going to pop into you, and you're going to do like what Clint talked about when he was meditating, and that thought came from behind his head and said about his mother. Freed him. He was able to now stand up and become. And I tell people, your life is, once you begin your journey, you're becoming. And when you say that word, it allows you freedom to grow, not to restrict oneself. And I want to encourage all of you guys. We're going to provide all of Clint's stuff. I want you to join his space, get into his place so that you can start becoming and change your life, man. This is what this is all about. Clint, I want to thank you for coming to Threads, man. This has been a good one. I love your revelation, if you will, and with the small steps, because we need to remind them it's the small stuff, man.
And it is. And, thank you for having me. I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I love these kind of conversations. These are the kind of conversations that remind me why I got into this stuff in the first place. And I love the fact that I've been able to combine all my life experiences and give people a different path and a different way to look at things using ancient wisdom, new science, old science, all the different stuff. Because the one thing I've learned in my life is that there is nothing new under the sun. All the stuff is just reformulated and regurgitated in a different way.
Yeah.
We just have a better way of understanding it. Like one of my favorite things that I've noticed is I read an article recently when they were talking about how human beings are bioelectric antennas, that they can literally take a picture of our body now and you can see our bioelectric aura around us. So all the claims that everybody have had about being able to read people's auras or being sensitive to different electromagnetic frequencies and people's auras is reality. They can actually prove it now. And that's the thing that I find so fascinating is whatever you think, whether you believe in God, whether you don't believe in God, whether you believe in reincarnation, whatever you believe, we don't know. And it's okay to just sit in not knowing because it's not going to hurt you. But don't be afraid to learn because that's the most important thing. That has been the thing that has saved me countless times is if I don't know the answer, I try to find it, or at least a close approximation as I can find. And with that, it allows me to continue to move forward and not stay stuck.
Yeah, I tell people that. It's beautiful advice. I said, your life is circular because you haven't made a decision yet. Exactly. The human being is designed, the whole of us is designed that once we have made a decision, that at a cellular level, things began to happen, that the focus began to shift, and we do something that is amazing. We began to pursue knowledge, information, to bring to pass what we have just decided. And I tell all of them, I always say it over and over, the reason why you are circular is because you're still thinking about it. You haven't made a decision. Right. Once you decide, the body, the mind, the spirit, all of us is going to come into unity to make sure that you acquire everything that is necessary to get what you had just released into your life.
I agree 100%.
All right, man. Thank you so much again. I'm going to provide everything, guys. I'm going to provide everything for him you need to get into your space. Those of you that have been in a space of depression or anxiety, this is the stuff that can help you because we heard his story, his journey. He is familiar with those feelings, with how and what it makes you do. He is very familiar with it. He had a detour based on something that happened in his life with his mom. And because Clint was there, he has everything necessary to help you out of the errors. He has the wisdom, he has the knowledge, he has the understanding. Because when you use all three of them, the wisdom, the understanding, and the knowledge, you're able to attain what you want. And I'm going to provide everything for you guys so that you can get into his space and get it, because you deserve your freedom. Thank you so much.